Me too. Good evening, everybody. It is 6 o'clock and I will call this meeting to order. Before I do the land acknowledgement, I will ask everyone to please silence cell phones and other electronic devices and remind council that our procedure bylaw forbids the use of cell phones during council and committee meetings. Brighton Council's work takes place on the traditional Indigenous territory of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe, now of Alderville, and we are thankful to be able to work and live on this land. We offer a land acknowledgement as a way to recognize, respect, and honor this territory. These, the original occupants, their ancestors, and the historic connection they still have with these lands and waters. We are grateful for the opportunity that these lands and waters present to the people of Brighton and grateful to work in partnership with the Indigenous community on their stewardship and sustainability. I have a motion moved by Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Butwell, that the October 30th, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting agenda be approved as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Before I ask for declarations of pecuniary interest, I will note that Councillor Wright does send her regrets for this evening. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? And if so, please state the general nature thereof. There are none noted. We have no delegations this evening. Madam Clerk, are you aware of any citizens' comments? None? That brings us to the staff report, which is essentially what we had last time, but perhaps I'll move to staff to fill in some of the gaps that were created by the questions that council asked. And if we can have that dialogue, I think our next step will just be to go to the spreadsheet and go through the items in the spreadsheet. So Director Whitfield, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Ostrander. So there were several questions last week that were given to staff to bring back some information. Most of them belong to Public Works. So I'm sure that Leslie will present a report. He also has his support staff, the managers, here this evening to help with some of the questions that the Committee of the Whole may have. In addition, I note that the next budget date of November 22nd is a conflict with the Library Board meeting. And so I am asking the Committee of the Whole to choose or select a different date so that we don't have that conflict and council members on that board can attend both meetings.
Thank you. So I'm going to make a note to select the date. We'll do that before we leave this room tonight. So I think, Mr. Director Whiteman, we're going to turn the floor over to you. Because quite right, Director Whitfield's quite right. Most of the questions belonged in your camp, sir.
Good evening. I think question one was to do with the F-550s or 2-ton trucks, and they are. And question two was, when will we replace the 2008 Sterling single axle? And our answer is in 2026. The next question, question three, is why are the HVAC units on 170 Main Street twice the price of the units at 35 Alice Street? The AC units are 12-15 ton at 170 Main Street, whereas the AC units at 35 Alice and 65 Sharp Road are 3 to 4 ton. And price is determined by size, make, and capacity. Do we need to replace the 2 HVAC units at 170 Main Street? And Danny, do we need to? Maybe. No, not in 2024. So I think one of the other questions had to do with consideration of Harbor Street project and some consideration as the residents have been waiting for some time for something to take place on that particular project. As mentioned, it is a multi-year project, multi-phase project. We did anticipate somewhere between 15 to 20 million. So we are roughly going to say at this point in time, anywhere from 12 to 18, just in case, because we have not taken into the amount that we had provided earlier on did not take into consideration the 15% contingency. So we also noted that at this point, given our obligations, commitments to County Road 64, and that looks like it's a go with regard to from the county's perspective. We are considering Marina Drive based upon configuration, alignment of the utilities, storm and sanitary, and that we could hook up quite easily to the existing storm if Marina Drive is taken into consideration. With that said, we estimated the costs for road and storm alone are $846,000. Harbor Street temporary storm connection, as I just mentioned, about $25,000. Water services or laterals are $192,000. Sanitary cleanouts $120,000. A subtotal of $1,183,000 just for Marina Drive. With a 15% contingency, $177,500. Excuse me. We're looking at roughly 1.3605 million. So I think that's where we are with regard to that. Anything else that I could answer, I'll try my best to. And if I don't have all the answers, very capable John Gooding will be able to provide some answers as well.
Thank you, Director Whiteman. So I'm going to circle back to the original questions with regard to the 2-ton trucks. I believe those questions were being asked because the general questioning was, do we need 2-ton trucks when we've been using whatever it was we've been using, 1-ton trucks? So do we really need twice the truck, I guess is the question. Mr. Platansky, welcome.
Check. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see everyone. So the question through you, Your Worship, the 2-ton truck is used for multiple reasons. So a 1-ton truck based on weight can only hold a certain amount of weight. Also, we use it for various reasons throughout the day, throughout the week. 1 is garbage. 2 could be snow plowing. 3 could be having more than 3 or 4 people in a truck at a time. So it's based on weight as well too. So we'd be able to, for example, if we're doing any kind of work for guardrails, we could load that truck a little bit heavier compared to a 1-ton. I wouldn't be able to hold the weight. The 1-ton that we have right now is a 2015 F550. It's about 8 years old. Its lifespan is about 5 years. We have put some considerable amount of money into it, so we're looking to move forward to replace that truck.
With 2 or just 1? Just 1 F550 2-ton truck.
Correct.
Got it. Questions from members of council? All right, the 2008 Councilor Belwell.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Your worship. And through you. So it really has mostly to do with the capacity of carrying, because you could throw a salter in the back of a 3/4 ton and put a plow blade on a 1-ton, correct? Balance that weight out.
Correct.
Correct. So are there any other projects other than guardrails that could justify the increased cost between a 1-ton and a 2-ton? And just bear with me. I'm working from a binder that doesn't have my notes from last time. What is the difference in the price again between those two?
Through you, through your worship, the counselor. So with the 1 ton, yes, you can use it for plowing. You can't put a salter in the back, not a very big one. The 3/4 ton you could. So those questions are, yes, you could. The 2 ton can be used for various construction projects. For example, if the job is too big for something that's like a 1 ton, you can use the 2 ton, using, for example, ditching material. If it's a small job, carrying loads of garbage, because we do multiple runs with garbage throughout the municipality. So where we can do 1 load compared to doing 3 or 4 loads with a 1 ton. So there's the capacity there. Also as well for our asphalt, so our cold patch, we can hold a lot more weight in that truck, less trips back to the yard with compared to like a 1 ton. Because a 1 ton you'd only be able to hold very, very little cold patch. And now that we're now that we are implementing a different type of cold patch with grindings, so they're it's like a recycled asphalt together, it holds more weight because of that, right? Because they're grindings. So it all comes down to capacity, right? So we can use it for various projects. Basically, we have more options in construction with the 2 ton compared to using just a 1 ton. And the price difference, on average, depending on inflation, because that's always fun to talk about. 1 ton, you're anywhere between 80,000, 70 to 80,000 to 100,000, depending on what kind of options you get. With the 2 ton, you're anywhere from 100,000 to 130, depending on what kind of options you get with it.
So a $30,000 to $50,000 price differential.
Correct.
As a follow-up,
Yes, thank you. And as a follow-up, the plan for the 1 ton, is that to sell it or is that to keep it in addition to the 2 ton?
The 1 ton, it's a 2
Oh,
ton.
sorry, the 2 ton.
Okay. No, so this would be a replacement. So we'd be selling this one.
Selling it.
Yeah, this one here, we had just last year we did about $6,000 worth of work, 6,600, somewhere around there. So brakes, rotors, calipers, and numerous things. So what we look to do is to put it on gov.deals. We would paint the frame. We would put some rust prevention on it, clean it up a little bit, and try to get as much equity out of the truck as we can for its age.
And roughly what would we expect to see? Ballpark, just ballpark.
It's a tough question. It just depends on what someone's willing to pay for it. It could be anywhere as low as 15,000 to maybe as high as 25 if we're lucky. If we're lucky, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it just depends on who's looking for that type of vehicle. If someone's really in desperate need of one and they don't want to buy a brand new vehicle because right now interest rates are 8%, they might pay a little bit more for something that's used.
Okay. And we use that what was it called?
Gov Deals.
Gov Deals. We use that exclusively?
Yes.
We do. Okay, thank you.
This is the replacement of a 2 ton with a 2 ton. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. Councillor Paredes.
Through the chair, thank you. Danny, I don't see an issue replacing a F-250 with an F-250. I mean, you got 136,000, probably 140,000 K on it now, and I'm sure it's seen its days. But in the area of automotive, I guess what I'm curious about and hoping that you can give me a little more clarification. You're talking about replacing a mechanic's truck, a 2009 Chevy, which only averages about 10K a year, with a new electric vehicle. But it goes on to say that the mechanic is currently using a 2019 Dodge, and it's going to be returned to the available operator fleet. The implication being we actually have an extra truck in the fleet that the mechanic could inherit and avoid purchasing a new one. Can you comment on that a little?
Through you, the chair, to Councillor Paredes. Yes, absolutely. So the idea here is to have that truck back into the fleet as much as possible, because now we have more staff where we can do more works. Our thought was to have an electric vehicle to follow the process as far as provincial and federal, regs that they're looking to implement with more electric vehicles. So we thought to keep the kilometers down, because the mechanic would only use it for on-site works, that after the mechanic was done with that truck, we could circle it back into the fleet. So we kind of two birds with one stone, if you will. And with a mechanic's vehicle, they have to get certain tools, toolboxes, all those things applied afterwards, as far as racks, maybe compressors, anything like that that he may need on site. So with the vehicle he's using right now, he doesn't have any of that. So with the truck, with the proposed electric vehicle, we would incorporate that afterwards. No problem.
Any other questions from members of council? Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley,
Thank you.
welcome.
And I know we're going to follow provincial and federal guidelines as far as electric vehicles go, but what's the difference between just getting a regular half ton instead of an electric half ton for the mechanic? If we were just getting quite a bit of difference, like $100,000 for a truck seems like a lot of money.
Through the chair, Councilor Rowley, absolutely it is. Especially with interest rates at 8%. So it is quite a considerable amount of money. But you factor in two different things. So one, you have electric vehicles, so you're saving on fuel, where gas you wouldn't be. The cost difference, sticker price, not much of a difference depending on what you get. You get XLT, because Ford is the only one that makes the electric vehicle as of right now. So we're limited to Ford. So we'll use Ford, for example. If you took an XLT gas vehicle and an XLT electric, the difference, you can get an XLT for probably about $85,000 right now, and then the electric vehicle, $100,000, plus taxes, right? So there is that little bit of a span, but if we're going the electric path, then this is a good start to it, in addition to the electric vehicles we have right now.
How much would we pay for in fuel on a non-electric vehicle over a course of its lifetime? I know I'm putting you on the spot there.
No, that's okay. So it's a good question. It varies. With the mechanic, if the mechanic was using that vehicle, we would be saving some fuel because they wouldn't be using it as much. Our road calls are very far and few between, luckily. But if someone else was using it in staff for any other works, then we'd be using a little bit more fuel. Absolutely.
Councilor Fredis?
Through the chair to Danny, this electric Ford is a crew cab, is it not? And not a regular cab or an extended cab. Am I correct in that?
Through the chair to Councilor Fredis. Yes, it is a crew cab. So a crew cab is not the length of the vehicle; it's how many people you can fit in the back.
I'm aware of that.
Okay, and so
The reason I bring that up is that a mechanic and a crew cab seems a little redundant because it gets a shorter pickup box to put compressors and stuff in. I guess the question was raised about what's the relative cost difference. Today in Kingston, there are 5 regular cab Ford F-150 work trucks with a full length box, and they're retailing about 51 to 54,000 versus $100,000 on a XLT crew cab electric vehicle. That buys an awful lot of fuel, and I just wonder, do we need to go that far when it's important to have a vehicle that will carry compressors and presses and all that other sort of stuff? And are we not better off with a regular cab full box work truck and take that cost savings and apply it to fuel? Just a question.
through the chair to Councilor Fredis. Yeah, I'm not aware of the cost in Kingston Ford, so that's news to me. From the vehicles that I was looking at in the surrounding area, I was seeing a little bit higher. So I'm not sure if it was the XLT or the STX. And was that a two-seater that was a crew cab you were saying?
The work truck is just a regular cab, so it would seat three. There is no extended cab. The only manufacturer that still makes an extended cab is Nissan. And I'm not advocating Nissan, but they're the only ones that do that. The big three have all dropped their extended cabs, so they only offer a regular cab work truck or crew cabs, which are geared more to the consumer market. And again, I question the benefit to the mechanic with all the stuff he has to carry, having a crew cab and a 5-foot box, where a regular cab with a 7-foot box would give him a whole lot more capacity to carry. And there is that huge difference in cost. I'm a little bit of a car guy, as you know, so and I've been shopping for a truck, so.
No, that's great. No, that's good. Great question. So the idea was to take that crew cab and circle it back into the fleet afterwards, right? So we try to use it for two reasons, right? So having just a single cab, you can fit 3 people, and that's correct, or 2 on average. As a work truck, yes, that would be a great work truck. You could do that. The thought process was, one, to stay within provincial and federal electric ranges, I guess. And then also once that was done, we would circle it back into the fleet. So that's the thought process that we had behind it. Is it set in stone? Absolutely not. But that's the way we were thinking that we would go.
Councillor Wheeldon has a question, but I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit. It was introduced to me in a sort of sidebar conversation that I had with Mr. Castleman on Friday about a second life program for vehicles. And could you talk to council about that? Because I think that's what you're alluding to with regard to this particular truck. We'd buy it for one purpose, and then with the idea that it would have a second life. So we really want to make sure we're buying the vehicle for both lives. And I want you to expand on that second life program, if you will.
Absolutely. So, with the second life program, in the sense that on average, a vehicle, if it has a lifespan of, let's say, 5 years or so, but you have the vehicle for that 5 years and you've only put on 20,000 kilometers on it, could we still use it for another 2 or 3 years? In my opinion, I would say yes, especially if you buy it brand new. So then we would then take that vehicle, bring it into the fleet, and use it as a secondary vehicle or for another vehicle for any type of works that we do. Also, if something in the sense that we have enough vehicles for all of our staff, if we hire more staff, we have that extra vehicle for when we need it. For example, if the mechanic is not using the truck that day for anything and we need an extra truck for something, it's available to us. So we're not just using it for the mechanic. Ideally, it's for the mechanic, but we could use it in other various works as well.
The primary use would be for the mechanic, but it would be a public works vehicle for anyone who needed it at the time.
That's correct. We're doing that right now. We call it slip seating. So you're moving, from one truck to the next truck. Some people are not fans of slip seating, but unfortunately, you could use the truck and use its full capabilities.
Thankfully, with their own vehicles, they don't have to worry about it. Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Thinking of the asset management plan, how long would it take to replace out the entire fleet? If we were starting with this vehicle, how many vehicles do you replace a year? I mean, on this, according to this, it's 2. And how many vehicles do we have in the fleet? So how long would it take to replace all of them with electric vehicles if we were starting this year?
Through the chair, through Councillor Wheeldon, that's a really good question. Right now, we're in fleet mode, if you will, and we're revamping and putting a 10-year plan together for the fleet. There's been some updates with the CVORs, with legislation, so we're really trying to take the bull by the horns, if you will, to try to put something together. So I'll have a better answer for you probably within about a month or so.
Thank you for that. My thought process is just that if we know that there's going to be federal mandates by 2035, there's no more internal combustion engines, then it seems like now is I mean, the best time to start would have been 5 years ago, and the next best time seems like now.
Thank you all. Any further questions on these trucks, be they 2-ton or otherwise? We'll come back to it. The 2008 Sterling single axle, this will replace in 2026. That was a question asked, I think, considering do we want to do the 2-ton or something else? I think that's where the conversation was going. Any comments or questions on that before I move on? Councillor Fredis?
To the chair, thank you. I'm just trying to find the page here. Just bear with me a sec. My recollection, first off, it's interesting to note that you feel you can hold off to 2026. My recollection as the mechanics assessment is the Sterling is in average shape and parts availability is exceedingly difficult. And because it's used for snow plowing and presumably the single axle allows it to get into roads that our tandems can't handle, and recognizing that snow removal is kind of important around here, are we really comfortable holding on for a couple of more years? Is this not something we should be maybe taking a more serious look at upgrading?
Mr. Blatansky?
Yes, absolutely. Through you, the chair, through to Councillor Fredis. Yes, that's a very good comment. To be honest with you, so let's back up a little bit. So the 2000 and the 808 is a spare truck. It's only used in those cases where a truck breaks down or we have a very heavy snowfall and we have to split up routes to try to get it down a little bit more efficient and faster. So it doesn't get a lot of use. But that being said, so everyone understands that right now, I would say probably about 12 months ago, or a little bit more, 12 to 2 years ago, you could buy a truck for $350,000 to $375,000, and you would get it in maybe 8 months to 12 months. We are now a little bit more than that. We're ordering trucks and looking at costs anywhere between $450,000 to $475,000 plus. And it's taking anywhere from 18 to 24 months to get that truck. So if we order a truck right now, there's a good chance that we wouldn't get it for 2 years. So to your point, should we be ordering 2 trucks right now? Yes. Am I trying to be conservative about this and trying to do the best we can with what we got? Absolutely. So that's why I said 2026, because it is a spare truck. So for example, in 2026, we would replace 116, which is in our fleet now, to the spare. So now 116 would be the spare and the new truck would replace 116. And then the 808, which is a spare truck now, would be on gov.deals. We would see what we could get for it.
Thank you. Councillor Botwell?
Thank you, and through you. So if we're looking at taking delivery in 2 years of a new one and moving the 08 down off the fleet completely, should we not be looking at the purchase price of a new one in this budget, perhaps? Because otherwise we're looking at a 4-year turnaround, correct? And is that what you meant?
Yes, so through the
Go ahead.
chair, the councillor, so yes, in the sense that it could take up to 24 months.
Mhm.
That's not guaranteed that it would. Right now, we're looking to replace 413, which is in dire needs to be replaced now. And then the next one would be in 2026. If there was room to replace 2 trucks in 2024, I would definitely support that decision. Just because of, for example, if we order a truck right now, we could order it. We're not paying for it right now, but we're obligated to pay for it when it does come in within 2 years.
We'd be obligated to budget for it as if it were coming in tomorrow. or
Correct.
in March. In theory.
Correct.
And we can budget any way we want at the end of the day, members of council, so keep that in mind too as we move this forward. Thank you. Anything further on that line item question? Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley?
Thank you. Just going to financing here. The one new 3/4 ton crew cab is going to be funded by development charges and 20% internal borrowing. Linda, how are the other trucks going to be financed? Is this all internal borrowing?
That's correct. One truck is in addition to the fleet, so we can utilize some development charges. And the other vehicles are replacements, so they'll all be internally funded.
Welcome. Director Whitfield, approximately how much is how much would $100,000 of borrowing internally cost us in repayment costs?
Well, it depends on what the interest rate is because it fluctuates and that's what we charge ourselves. Right now, our interest rate on the bank account, I think unless it's changed since last week, the prime rate 7.2, we subtract 1.75, so we're at 5.45%. So per year. And then that declines each year. So I have to go and look at that spreadsheet that maybe in here. Jim, look at your spouse. So generally, if we were borrowing for 10 years, $100,000, we would break that down into 10 years of payments. So we're paying it as we use it up. And so I would generally budget for 15,000 a year. And then probably in the last year, it's going to be less than that.
Just gives us an idea if we do go down the road of another almost $500,000 truck, that it's going to cost us $75,000 next year on the budget.
So Danny, the truck that we would replace next would be the other single axle. What year is that?
That's a 16.
And that's why he was suggesting 2026.
With theory that we should order it in 2024 if we want it in 20. Although we've never had to do that before, right? Because we've always received the vehicle within 8 to 12 months.
But if I may, you wouldn't necessarily budget for that
Right.
this year because you're not going to be paying that money this year.
Right.
That would just be a commitment. So we would have to note that that's a commitment if there's a signed contract.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to question 3, or what's listed as question 3 in the email from Director Whiteman of October 25th. Why are the HVAC units on 170 twice the price? Well, I think we got the answer because of the different tonnage. And then the next question is, do we need to replace the 2 HVAC units at 170 Main Street? And the answer was not in 2024, but they're budgeted for in 2024. I wonder if you could help us out there.
Absolutely, through your worship. So I'll explain all 3 units. So there's 3 units. 2 of them are carriers. They're 12 tons. And then the third one is a Lennox, which is a 10 ton. So the carriers, the one on the west side cools down the doctor's offices. And we've been having the most issues with those ones. We've changed belts, pulleys. That has a 15-year lifespan. We're at year 17 right now. So that one, I highly recommend that we replace as soon as possible. The middle unit, same lifespan, 17 years, had some replacement parts on it, but not as much as the west unit. The Lennox, which cools down the YMCA. The only issues that we are running into with that particular unit was the cooling of the coils. So for example, AC units can only cool down so much, and then after that, those coils start freezing up and like literally freeze the coil. So we have to either reheat that coil or replace the coil. That's the only thing that's been going wrong with that Lennox. So in my opinion, the Lennox can be held off, absolutely, but the two carriers would definitely need to be replaced. The good news, if this is good news, is that the ductwork is already been fabricated to fit a carrier. So if we were to replace that with another carrier, it would reduce cost in sheet metal and the platform as well. Updated costs? Yeah, so the updated costs, I don't have them right in front of me right now. They were between $45,000 to $49,000 with 10% for inflation. Those updated costs just came to me on just last week. That factors in everything. That's the unit itself, the installation, sheet metal work, if any, platform that was created for the unit itself for the weights, as well as the crane, because you have to hire a crane to lift that onto the building.
The budget line item for these two units are 35 each, and you're suggesting they should be closer to 50 each.
Correct. With a contingency of 10% for inflation as well.
And you're suggesting they should be replaced this year,
Two of them,
two of them,
correct.
not the third.
Not the third.
Members of council? Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair to Danny, thank you for the update. I know the original budget was 70,000. Director Whiteman sent us an adjuster indicating another 25,000, and I guess the contingency will get us close to the 100,000 mark. I think we need to go ahead and do it this year. It's hard enough to keep doctors in this town, and having them get hot and bothered because of failed air conditioner isn't going to help our cause. So, and why postpone the inevitable? It'll just put us in a situation where we'll be under a panic to do 3 of them. So to me, it makes perfect sense that we do it this coming year.
Thank you for that. So any other questions from members of council on these 4 answers we received from Director Whiteman before I move on to Harbor Street, Wallace Street Marina for a brief discussion around that? So Harbor Street, Wallace Street, Marina Drive, pardon me, Wallace Drive, Marina Drive. The suggestion is if we do anything to do Marina or budget for Marina at $1.36 million total. Members of council. Councillor Wielden.
Is there an advantage to getting part of the project started this coming year? I know you had Marina as part of the general Harbor Street upgrade. Is there benefit to getting started earlier?
Director Whiteman.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes. I do believe so. It's if their money is available, you have the funding for it. I think, as I said earlier, it's been ongoing for some time. So I don't know if there is a consideration or expectation in the community. And John has pointed out quite clearly that there are opportunities to take a look at what the conditions are out there. This will give us a better indication as to the overall juggernaut of a big project from and not only Marina but Wallace, as well as Harbor Street from County Road 64 all the way to Ontario Street. There are some challenges, some risks that are associated with this project, the high water table, etc. the dewatering, obviously that comes forth during construction. And the opportunity to look into what is there and what we are to encounter, you know, on a broader scale with a bigger project.
Councillor Wheeldon?
I recall at the public meeting about that, we were chatting a little bit with the engineering drawings there, and I asked about if the current plans take into account weather, changing weather with climate change and the expectation of more flood events. I guess you're here to speak to that.
Through the chair is right now the stormwater engineer is looking at those considerations. So it's the 60% drawings. We just kind of lay out the surface works, whatnot, and then once we get into the 60 to 90, we're looking at the underground where we put catch basins, diameter pipes, and whatnot. That's kind of where the project's sitting right now.
At what point will we be at the 90% design stage, Mr. Gooding?
I've got a commitment from the engineer that the end of the year, so December, we'll have the 90%, and then we'll be ready for construction in 24, whatever we choose.
The end of this year?
Correct.
Thank you. Just made, Councillor Fredis, you have a quizzical look on your face as if you might have a question, but you're not willing to put your hand up yet. So I'm going to call you out.
Okay, I will. So the engineering will be completed for all of Harbor, Marinas and Wallace?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay. By the end of this year. So I guess the question is, if I understand the numbers, if we were to do just say one street to get a start on it, to alleviate some of the political concern, if I can call it that. The recommendation from Director Whiteman is that we start on Marina, which is the most expensive one at about 1.2 to 1.4. Am I understanding that correctly?
Through chair, yes, it's correct. And we looked at Wallace Street, which is the shortest of the three. But there's a sanitary line on Harbor Street that's in line where the new storm's going to go. So we couldn't economically do that ahead of working on Harbor Street.
Okay. All right. I follow the logic there. I guess my view to the chair, to Director Whiteman and Mr. Gooding and Danny is that I was a little concerned in here about our road repair average dropping down from the mid-20s down to 15s. And my concern is that we start to fall behind. And I know it's not a nice number, but I think it's something that we should be doing. Let's start with the practical one per your recommendation, being Marina, and then we'll address the others in the next 2 years. That would be my recommendation, and I hope others would concur.
So on page 2 of the spreadsheet, I've just made a little note that says Marina 1.36, and when we go through the list, we can have a more fulsome conversation, more fulsome dialogue about where we'd find the money for that. We don't even know what our OSIF funding is this year, do we? We're comfortable that it won't be less than last year, but we don't know if it's going to be more.
It will definitely be less than last year because it was doubled.
Right.
But I anticipate that it's going to come in at like a single around 370, I think I put in the budget. So we have OSIF and gas tax monies there and public works reserves. So this project could be something that council could take on without too much impact. And now that it's only water services and wastewater laterals, it's going to be less of a cost for our environmental services budgets. And so it's more feasible than what we were anticipating in the beginning.
Thank you. Anything further on that? All right. Just for those who are following the bouncing ball, we did ask a question about an operational item from Mount Hope Cemetery. We did get the answer, and I suspect we'll be circling back to a question that relates to when we discuss the operational budget. Thank you. No. Sure. Oh, hurry up.
That's for operation. So we don't need to discuss that tonight. That's exactly what you're saying,
That
correct?
is what I'm saying.
All right, I won't ask.
That was a lot of words for someone who wasn't asking a question. And I asked a question about Little Lake Road, from Tees Lane down to County Road 30. I'm happy to report I saw construction crews there. Had to divert on my way down here to Alexander Road because it looks like that job is getting done and is budgeted in the 2023 budget. So congratulations, staff. Shall we turn to the spreadsheets? So the first item, the first section is general government. The only item that is tax support on that is the council chamber microphones at $50,000. Everything else is being funded by development charges, reserves, or reserve funds. Are there questions or comments from members of council? Wishes or wants? Deletions or amendments? I'm moving on to the fire department. In the fire department budget, almost everything is in tax support with the exception of the design of the new fire hall, which is being financed externally at $100,000. The other $180,000 of this budget, additional monies from this budget, are in the tax support. Questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Fredis.
I wonder if we could perhaps talk about the drone at $5,000. I've had some follow-up with the chief in light of the fact that we're in controlled airspace and there are fairly significant regulations regarding drone certification and flight qualification depending on the size. And I think the chief may have some further information to share.
Thank you, Chief Thompson.
Good evening, Your Worship. Yes, we did have some follow-up. Deputy Hutchison did some more research on the DJI Mini 3 Pro drone, which is it's a very small drone, and you will be happy to know the cost has went from 5,000 to 2,500, which was good. We did talk to Councillor Fredis this afternoon, both deputy and myself, to clarify. As long as we stay under 249 grams, I believe. All we require is basic training, online training certificate is all we require for remote pilot aircraft system. We also got a letter from the warden of Workworth Prison as well to say that we can fly not over top of the prison or close to taking pictures there, but within their safety zone as well, as long as we make them aware within an hour of flight time. And if we stay under 400 feet, we're relatively safe in the no-fly zone, I'll call it, for CFB Trenton. So I think we've done most of our homework with this as a beginner drone. Did talk to Mantra, who is our GIS coordinator, who's very into these drones and larger ones and thermal scans and the whole works, which would be a good asset for the town in the future, but not at this time. But for us to have this tool in the toolbox, I think would pay us back this year for sure. And we'll keep track of how many times we actually used it for wildland fires and inspections and so on, training, the whole works. Any questions on that? I guess that's your.
That is my that is my line, but that's okay. Questions or comments? Is there any other lines that you can have in your budget? Just asking.
No, not yet. But if I may, I had another second question with my budget from Councillor Butwell about the EV blankets that we for suppression blankets. And the question was the disposal of them blankets. And when I talked to GFL today, the girl's answer was, that's a really good question. So what we have found out is from different tow companies, our local recycling company and so on, that any burnt out electric vehicles are a struggle right now to handle. They're contaminating the waste stream. If there's any lithium ion battery residual, I don't know, just residual, I guess you call it, left in there, it is contaminating the stream. So it's relatively new to everybody. So when you call a tow company says they take them to their yard, they let them, or to a gravel pit, let them burn out and dry, and then they call the insurance company. You call the insurance company, they call the recyclers. You call the recyclers say it contaminates the waste stream. So there's not really any solid answers from that part of it. But as far as the blankets go, we can reuse them. Our GFL will decontaminate them, and you can reuse them up to 6 times. So what they suggested was if we used one, we leave it on there till we get it to the yard for the tow company. We take it, we put it in a 45-gallon drum, we send it to GFL, probably in Whitby or Oshawa. They would decontaminate it for us, put it all back together, and then we would receive that back. And we would transfer that cost to the owner of the vehicle insurance company. So again, this would be a one-time purchase, 2 blankets per haul. And then, so that way we have the spare, and yeah, try to recycle them as many times as we can.
Councilor Butwell.
Thank you, through you. Thanks for doing all that legwork, the phone call, telephone tag. So looking forward, you would charge that back to the insurance company, and I'm not suggesting how you might wish to do your budgeting, but if we know that we can get approximately 6 uses out of each one, is that what I understood? Maybe billing back a portion of that cost of a new one as well, so that.
Right. Yeah, we can mark up our consumables for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that way the insurance company, the users of the product, their insurance company are paying for the new product when we have to replace it. I think that seems only appropriate.
That's correct. And we do that now currently, your worship, with, say on the 401, if we blow a line on the 401, like a hose line, they'll reimburse us. And the insurance companies are pretty good, as long as you can justify it. They, put in 1,000 feet of hose, right? You have to be justified. So I will say we're probably in the lead for Ontario right now in the fire service and off these questions that we're asking, because although EV vehicles are coming, they are going to be a real nemesis in the fire service. From this blanket here is big. The big sell on this is if you had a in your driveway, it's plugged in, or in your garage, we can put this blanket on to smother and control it without protecting the exposure itself. So right now we can pour water on them all day and it takes weeks to put them out. So the environmental impact of having this additional water into the environment, contaminated, or the blanket to try to control it, keep it isolated, and use less water.
Any further questions on that line item? And if not, on the fire department's overall capital budget? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Moving over to for health services. Right, in Health Services Center, the 2 items are the AC units, which we found out are $49,000 each, which I'm calling 50 for fun because I like round numbers. Those are the only 2. Those are the 2 tax supported. The emergency exit stairs are being funded through reserves. I'm changing the 2 line items on my spreadsheet to say $50,000, making the total for health services $100,000. Are there any objections to that? Any further questions on the health services capital budget? Public Works building, 67 sharp concrete pad for the outdoor charging stations, for the door enlargements and flooring, and for the Chatton garage improvements. all but $95,000 are being funded through tax support for a total of $185,000. 90 is reserves finance, what we borrowed from reserves, pardon me, and a part of their chat and garage will be paid for through reserves. So questions or comments on the Public Works building capital? Flipping over to equipment. Almost all of the equipment items are being funded through borrowing from reserves at $740,000, 80,000 from development charges, and total $35,000 from tax support. I'll open the floor to questions or comments about the equipment from Public Works. Councillor Fredis.
I wonder if we could just have another look, perhaps ask the director and Danny to have a look at the half-ton mechanic truck electric versus a fuel-powered work truck, regular cab, full-length bed so that they can haul all the equipment. As I said, my gut tells me that we're looking at easily a $45,000 capital cost difference, which buys an awful lot of fuel. And, you know, with a 10-year life expectancy on this truck, there'll be a couple of years to replace it before that 2035 mandate. So I'm hoping that we can just kind of revisit that a little bit to see if it's the right way to go.
Your worship, to Councillor Fraz, yes. We could take another look.
So you'll bring some information back to us at our next budget meeting?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Anything else on this? Okay, I'm going to move on to safety, the guide rails. They are all being funded through tax support. Questions or comments? Sidewalks, this is the Prince Edward Street Sidewalk and Boulevard. This is the project that is being done in partnership with the County of Northumberland, and it is being funded through grants or deferred revenue. Director, is it deferred revenue or is it grants?
It's being funded by gas tax, federal
Gas tax. Thank you. Any questions or comments on the sidewalk capital? Councillor Wheeldon?
Thank you. Just jog my memory, please. Does that include bike lanes and sidewalks on both sides?
I think it's just the walking portion. The bike path would be Prince County, I think. Mr. Gooding.
Through the chair, that's correct. Is the bike lanes are on street and then the sidewalks are off. And what we made effort is to preserve as much sidewalk as we can that we don't have to replace.
Anything further on that? Councillor Fredis?
Through the chair, thank you. My recollection of the numbers, and struggling to find it here, was the total Prince Edward Street was pushing $6.5 or $7 million, with about $1 million of that for sidewalks. But there's 350 here. Kind of what happened to the rest? Are we only doing part of it?
Director?
It is through you, Mr. Mayor. It is basically 2 or 3 phases. Multi-year project, 24-25. The urban section, we are thinking of doing in 2 phases. Not all of the sidewalk and boulevard will be completed in 2024. So we're taking an estimate in terms of what we have. Roughly 35% of that would be for 2024.
Thank you both. Any other questions? I'm going to move on to stormwater compliance through the master plan. $350,000 through tax support, $275,000 through grants or deferred revenue, and $50,000 from reserves. Questions or comments? And this of course is just new capital projects for stormwater compliance. Is that correct?
Through the chair, correct.
So it would not include things like, I think I said this last time, but I want everyone to be clear, it would not include things like any upgrades or needs for the Brighton by the Bay pond, which will be dealt with through operational budget.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it would be with an operations concern at Brighton by the Bay.
So I will flip back to this conversation when we deal with the operational budget, which I probably said last time as well. Any other questions or comments with regard to stormwater? Moving on to road construction projects. $500,000 plus from tax support, 880 from grants, which I assume is gas tax. 380 from reserves. A conversation about adding $1.36 million for Marina. And Director Whitfield, could you tell us where those monies would come from, or where your ideas for those monies would come from?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Ostrander. So with the 15% contingency, Marina Drive Water Services would be $220,800 funded through the water reserve. And the wastewater laterals would be $138,000 and funded again through the wastewater reserve fund. The tax support portion is $1,001,650. And I would recommend that we add Marina Drive to the current DC study because we're re-urbanizing it. We're going to be changing it from ditching to underground services for handling the stormwater and including some walking like sidewalks or walking path along the roadway. So I would assume that would be a 50%. So I put in here right now, if we used $500,000 from development charges, and used 300,000 from OSIF, then you would still have the 2024 contribution of OSIF in the reserve. And then my final suggestion would be to use Public Works reserves at 185,000, which gets you back down to $0. Actually, it gets you down to 16,650. My apologies.
And the 16,000 would come from tax support?
Yes. I had another suggestion for you though. So you had an increase of $30,000 for the addition of the cost of the HVAC at 170 Main. And I wondered if council may be receptive to paying for those 2 units over 2 years. And then if we had to replace the 3rd unit next year, then we would borrow it for 1 year, and then you would have 1 per year for 3 years to lessen the impact to the taxpayer at that building. So we could actually utilize that, internal borrowing. So instead of it being 100,000, you could have 50,000 this year and 50,000 in 2025. And that may help you get some of that down too.
I'll come back to that, members
Okay.
of council. Is everyone comfortable with that scenario to get Marina started? Just for the record, I'm getting nods of heads, so we will carry on. Parks and Recreation Arena. With the exception of $42,000, the entirety of this budget is coming from tax support of just shy of $133,000. Questions or comments? Councillor Fredis?
I'm wondering if we can revisit the new ice resurfacing unit for 95,000. I know the sheet says, 10-year replacement cycle, but the mechanic is rated as excellent condition, kind of below average wear and excellent parts availability. And the Zamboni people claim on their website that these units have a 15 to 18-year life expectancy. So I wonder, in light of some of our other priorities, if it cannot wait a year or two.
Members of council? Director, comments?
Again, historically, we've been replacing it every 10 years. So that's basically what we've been doing, replacement every 10 years. And we've been trouble-free.
With the replacement of this value, is there a reason we don't borrow from reserves to pay for it?
Well, there's no reason in particular. I guess I just didn't think about it as being a vehicle, but it is rolling stock.
It is rolling stock. And if we were to, go ahead.
Oh, for you, Mr. Mayor, we will get a trade-in on this. I know the last unit, we ended up getting $22,000 from Zamboni.
Councillor Butwell?
Thank you, through you. So I as well did some reading on this unit. And at 15 to 18 years replacement on it, we should still have 50% of its life left. So to me, it seems that we're trading it in and spending money just because it's what we've always done. If it is properly maintained, which I'm sure that we follow all the recommended maintenance schedules and look after it properly, it would seem that we still have a good another 5 years at least on this unit. And perhaps in light of adding additional costs that were not expected, a unit that's working essentially without any issue and still having so much life left, it doesn't seem like a good spending of taxpayer money to me.
Did this unit not go down a few years ago during a tournament?
Yes.
And I got a bunch of calls.
Yeah, we were lucky enough that we were able to get a hold of a mechanic on Sunday morning, and they floated us one. And so we only lost 5 hours of rentals. Again, every town is different. There are some towns that replace them after 6 years, 8 years, 10 years.
And
So-
if we had two ice surfacing machines and one went down, no big deal. Where we had multi rinks and had to do. I don't think this would be a discussion. We'd say yes, we can wait a year. But given that this machine has already gone down and we had to go through his heroic efforts on a weekend to make sure it was usable for people at the arena, I'm not comfortable waiting an extra year. Unless it's okay to publish your phone numbers for the hotline when it goes down. Councillor Butwell.
Thank you. Using that argument, though, we should be replacing everything before its due date, 2/3 of its way through its life. So if we have 5 years on a works truck, we should be replacing them every 3 just because.
Well, I think we do have a cycle of how we replace our rolling stock, and I would suggest that most of our rolling stock is not at its end of life when we replace it, for the very reason that we don't want to be driving junk around the community.
Absolutely. I will leave it at that.
I would be curious what the cost to the municipality would be if we did borrow from reserves on this. I'm guessing it's around $15,000 because it's close to 100 grand. Yeah.
I would say probably 12,000 a
Yeah.
year.
Councillor Fredis.
It's unfortunate that you had the one bad time, but if I'm understanding correctly, over the 10 years life, you were down 5 hours. That's not bad. Heck, I've had new cars that have been laid up longer than that. So I think we're looking to replace something prematurely and overreacting to political environment because we were down for 5 hours. Just my view.
Perhaps I'm being politically hyperbolic, but I don't think we're reacting to a political environment. We have replaced this vehicle, this piece of rolling stock every 10 years. And it's not a policy by any stretch, but it's not a bad idea to replace our rolling stock before it becomes critical. So the question is, purchase or don't purchase? And if the answer is purchase, all on tax support or fund through borrowing from reserves. Questions, comments? Where do we want to go? You say don't purchase?
I don't mind purchasing it. I also don't mind financing it internally. I don't think I'd want to externally.
Right. And that's what we're talking about. Borrow from reserves, repay the reserves. Acting Deputy Mayor?
Which reserve?
The cumulative reserve fund and reserves.
The one we use to purchase all our vehicles.
So we don't use a particular reserve anymore. When we started the program, we used to just use the urban infrastructure reserve. At this point, we're borrowing from the cumulative total of the reserve funds in the reserve to be able to borrow to fund our projects. So that's the way we've been doing it for the last few years. We don't have 3.8 million in the urban infrastructure reserve fund, but we're borrowing about that much.
Okay, which way do you want to go? You're just thinking.
I'm just getting a little concerned that we're borrowing, and reserves are depleting. And yeah, that's a little bit of a concern to me. Like,
Yeah,
we can only go to the well so many times.
right, but we are repaying that well in this case. Certainly not true of everything we're doing, but in this case, we would be repaying ourselves for. Councillor Butwell? You saying no, don't buy it at all?
I feel much the same as our deputy mayor, that we keep answering everything with we can borrow from reserves, and interest rates are high right now. And I don't think I would support purchasing it this year at all.
So not at all? I didn't get a response from you on whether you want to buy it or don't buy it.
Trying to listen to both sides here, which is what we're here to do. But if we can repay it through reserves, I think I would be okay with purchasing.
And I would agree with that. So let's get it into the reserve borrowing. Go ahead, Director.
Thank you, Mayor Ostrander. So Director Miller and I were discussing that he has 406,000 in his reserves, and he's been putting money away in the arena reserves, so arena projects for a while. Also, with the trade-in, if he got 20,000 back, he would really be only using 75,000 of his reserves. So that is also something that we as staff are comfortable with.
So back around the table we go. How's everyone feel about that? You still on don't buy it? I can tell. I can read you. You're okay using the reserve fund that is being suggested by the directors? No comment? Acting Deputy Mayor?
Which one are we using? The recreation one? That has $50,000 in it?
My apologies, not the reserve fund, but the reserve, recreation reserve. It's be on the first page, and I believe it's 406,000 in there right now.
If we can do that, I'm okay with that.
All right, let's go down that road.
So through you, Mayor, I think that we'll put in the whole 95,000 is coming out of the reserve because by policy, we put the trade-in value back in the
Back into
reserve.
Good. Moving on, going to parks. 2 turns, Baltine Canteen, Peace Park, signage. $20,000 coming out of reserve, 6 from DCs, 20,000 from Parkland Reserve, 150,000 from grants or deferred revenue, and 72.5, almost $73,000 out of tax support. Questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Wheeldon?
Does this include the grant for the washrooms? Thank you.
Councillor Fredis?
I guess I have the same concern about the zero-turn mowers as I did about the ice resurfacing unit. As I recall, the sheet said these have about 900 to 1,000 hours. John Deere rates them at 1,500 to 2,000 hours. And I know we may have done it on a 5-year cycle before, but is it really necessary now? And I think we just got a new one. So does that really make 2 of them necessary now?
Director?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. The one that we got that's new is earmarked for Mount Hope Cemetery. That replaces the one there. And these 2 replace the 2 John Deeres that we use for the grass crew.
Acting Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. And I just had some ideas around that too. You and I spoke about that. Can we leave this decision until we speak more about operations as well? Because it would kind of fall under some of that maybe.
I understand what you're saying, but we want to get through the capital budget so we can pass the capital budget and allow staff to tender the item. So I would suggest that although it's operational, now might be a good time to have the discussion you wanted to have.
So my question earlier, when you told me not to ask the question, now's the time. Okay. So I guess my question is, Jim, and I know you sent us an email when I asked regarding wages that are spent to look after lawn maintenance and those things up at the cemetery. I wonder if staff have at all ever considered maybe contracting just that project. I know other comments that we've heard, you know, with staff struggling to keep up with all of the parkland and everything that we have to look after. Wondering if the wages and all those dollars compiled that look after just to look after Mount Hope, along with, you know, brand new equipment sitting there that's used for nothing else. Would staff consider looking into what it would cost to contract just to have the maintenance done up there? I believe many years ago we used to do that and then brought it back in-house, I think, to look after. Has that been a consideration, or is that something that we could look into as we move forward? It would save the cost of maybe one more, maybe. I'm just wondering if there's opportunity to look into a contract.
Well, it's never been looked into because it was council's direction at the time we took it over was that we would cut it.
So just a little history lesson for everyone. Mount Hope Cemetery had its own board once upon a time, and the Mount Hope Cemetery board contracted out the maintenance of the cemetery. When the board was dissolved, the municipality took over the full operational aspects of the cemetery, not just the funding of the board, which is what we used to do. And at that point, it was council's direction for staff to maintain that as if it was one of our parks. We don't have our human resources person here. I'm just curious from a collective agreement point of view, if we'd be getting ourselves into any quagmires there. And Mr. Castleman, if you're able to chime in, I'd appreciate it.
Certainly. I think that if the direction from council is to give consideration to contracting out, I think that we want to be wary of the existing terms and conditions within our collective agreement. Having said that, negotiations are coming up. The existing collective agreement expires at the end of this year. So certainly if that's the direction of council to go down that path, we'll plan and negotiate accordingly.
Councillor Butwell.
Thank you through you, to our mayor, to council, to staff. I will not ever be supporting contracting out when we already have existing employees in those positions. Traditionally, it has resulted in it being much more expensive overall. It also does not guarantee that those jobs stay in our community. So I'm just going to make that statement right now.
Thank you. Acting Deputy Mayor.
I'm just looking for just a review consideration of this, just a comparator. Don't want to ruffle any feathers at this stage. I'm just looking to compare whether or not leaving brand new equipment sitting up there used only for one park. I know we'll get 2 other new ones, but we have a lot of parks and a lot of green space to maintain. It just sits there. I'm just wondering, like, we could get more use out of that. The same thing with the Second Life trucks, right? How much time do we spend up there? 1 day a week? I don't know
Miller?
the timeframes. I'm just looking.
It takes 1 to 2 days to cut and 1 to 2 days to trim every other week. So you're doing 3 days a week up there to maintain it at the level of service that we're maintaining. Over the years, we have actually made it less budget wise compared to when we took it over. I think we're still less than what the cemetery board was charging us.
Councillor Butwell.
Thank you, and through you. Perhaps, and I understand why you asked the question. I completely understand. Perhaps looking at having a trailer that we could move it around to other sites might be an extension of the conversation. Then if we have a machine that's sitting up there that's not being used to its full potential.
Director.
It is used now and again if we have a machine or 2 down. You know, we do use that whenever we need to, but it's specifically up there for that use. Like it was before. We're just replacing the zero turn that was always been there, even with the cemetery board.
Thank you. So let's park the discussion about any contracting out for now, at least, until we get to the operational budget, and just focus on the 2 zero-turn mowers and what do we want to fund in this budget? 1, 2, or none? None? Councillor Fredis says none.
Willing to fund 1
1
for now.
and 1.5.
May I ask just a very quick
You
question
can, of
again?
course.
So we have, which are the 2 units again? Where are they located? Are they the ones that are for full-time park and rec use, or is one at Mount Hope? They're the
No,
full-time.
full-time Parks and Rec use.
And the plan would be to sell both of them?
They're dovetails.
Would there be any value in holding on to one of them as the fallback? And rotating it through, keep it in good condition as a backup, and oiled and ready to go? And maybe reducing our.
You could. We do have the one from Mount Hope that we replaced this year.
Mhm.
We still haven't received that unit. That tells you how the delivery is. You know, we were hoping to use that as our backup and sell the 2 John Deere units together.
No, Councillor Fredis mentioned 900 and something hours. Was it not like 600 and 680? Or are those 2 other units that I'm thinking of? Yeah. I don't have an issue replacing one of them. I am not sure how I feel about a second one. I might need a few minutes.
So we've got 0. We've got 1. We've got 1, maybe 2. Councillor Wielden?
Well, in general, when staff bring their recommendations, it's because they've thought it through and calculated what would work best for their department. So I'm prone to just go with that. Jim, do you think you're able to do it with just 1? Is that going to create a lot of headache for you in your department?
I don't think it'll create it much like a real big headache, but you're not replacing your fleet like you normally do. So you're gonna be looking at another one, I guess, the following year.
Whereas next year we wouldn't be looking at any, in theory.
Right.
Councillor Botwell?
Thank you again. And I know that you're moving on. So I'm noticing the department has established useful life at either 5 or 10 years. Were those numbers just through time? They are nice round numbers. They kind of worked out. Everything just rolled over. Would there be some value in looking at our hourly usage and extending our replacement timelines based on our we look at the assessment for overall condition, downtime, and replacement parts availability. Most everything is above average or excellent with minimal downtime and excellent parts availability. And we're not using these machines to their full potential. Perhaps extending that 5 years to something else. And that's just an idea going forward so that we're not necessarily replacing units so frequently when there's literally nothing wrong with them.
Director?
When I started here 27 years ago, we had no replacement policy and we ran stuff into the ground. And I'm telling you, as a staff, it was embarrassing and it wasn't the way to do it. So over the years, through trial and error, we have established timelines, especially mowers. We've died a couple of times where we've tried to go that extra year. And all it's been is breakdown after breakdown. So that's why we've established the 5-year. Staff can tell you that too.
Councillor Botwell?
Thanks. And I don't dispute that you probably walked into a jungle and carved some nice policies and procedures out of it. I used to run a business unit and we had 2 of these 0-turn units, and our replacement on them with proper maintenance, for ourselves was 8 years. And we had very little downtime. We had 2, we didn't have any backup. So I have a little bit of history on asset management, and 5 years is a little low for my comfort level in my experience. So I think that, with the way things are being built now and they're easier to work on. I'm assuming we do a lot of the work in-house with our mechanic. I'm thinking maybe that 5-year, maybe we could relook at that at some point.
Councillor Wielden?
Through you, is there a benefit to doing them both together, or is that just simpler, or is there any benefit to staggering the purchase?
Director?
I think you get a better deal like buying 2 at the same time as opposed to 1 and 1. But again, I honestly can't give you a true.
So if we were to remove 1, would it reduce the budget by half, or would we be reducing the budget by half plus 10% or something? I don't know.
So we did have, were we adding to the fleet at all or just replacing 2 units? Okay, so it's actually the $6,000 that's in development charges can't be used if we're just replacing 2 units. So therefore it's the full 40,000 at tax support, so it'd be half.
So we would be removing $14,000 from the tax support of this budget and the $6,000 from the DCs. Thank you. Okay. So none, 1, I think 1, questionable 1, Two. I'm going to come back to you, Councillor Butwell, because you're questionable one. I want just, if you could put words behind that, I'd appreciate it.
So we're looking at 2024's budget. They're both 2019 units, excellent condition, minimal downtime. One of,
Sorry, aren't they 2017s?
where are they? "2017 is the cemetery one. These are 2019.
I'm just reading
units.
from the spreadsheet.
Yeah. Sorry.
Right, because next year they'll be 5 years old, right?
Yeah,
yeah,
next year they'd be
that's right.
5 years old. I struggle, honestly, I'm struggling with this one. I'm really struggling with it. I realize it's negligible dollar amounts, but this is tax support. I'd love to see a staggered process for bringing these through the fleet, or for running them through. I would say one, I guess, as a compromise in this one, but I'm really not 100% comfortable with it. So perhaps as there may be some messaging for next year's budget that maybe a closer look at some of these things.
Okay, I'm putting down one. All in tax support for $20,000. Bulk canteen renovation project, most of that's coming out of possible grant and a little bit of tax support. Assume we're all good there. Peace Park playground project, parkland reserves, and some tax support. Any issues there, council? Signage upgrades, $5,000, all tax support. Going to move on to Mount Hope Cemetery. Stamp concrete walking area around perimeter for the new columbarium, $10,000, being borrowed from reserves. Questions or comments, council? Trails and boardwalks, trail construction and renovations, $136,000, 109 from reserves, 27 from tax support. Questions or comments? Director Whitfield, what does that bring our tax support for Parks and Recreation to?
We've removed $109,000 from the Parks and Rec total. So the tax support for Parks and Rec is $123,387. And right now, with all the changes that have been recommended tonight, we're actually at a minus 0.92% capital increase.
And we started at
3.0.
Moving over to planning. Almost everything is coming from reserves with $22,000 for the citywide software coming out of tax support. Questions or comments from council? Building department, same. With the exception of the reserve comment. The tax support is 22. Questions or comments? And bylaw $7,200 for the same software. Tax support. So what is our total tax support capital line item, Director?
We are at $1,639,386.
Does that include 16,000 or so for Marina in the tax support?
That is
Okay,
correct.
just want to make sure my notes are correct. And it also includes borrowing 25 and 25 for the two AC units and putting 25 and 25 in tax support? Or however you want to do it. Pay for one outright, borrow for the other one, doesn't really matter. It's all 50 grand.
So I had I had an addition of 30,000 to the, for HVAC, which is now 100,000 from 70. All tax support. And did you have something different in your note?
Your recommendation to pay for them over 2 years.
Yes, I wasn't sure if you had consensus on that.
I didn't, I just made notes. I didn't even ask for any consensus.
Okay.
So members of council, where would you like to go with regard to the budgeting of the HVAC units at 170 Main? All out of tax support, which is where it is right now, putting us at minus 0.92%. So leave it there then. Yeah. I think it makes sense to leave it there given that.
If I may, Mayor Ostrander, I think that we could get the capital budget back up to 3% by reducing the amount we take from OSIF for the for Marina Drive and save that money for part 2 Wallace next year.
I think that's a good idea. Otherwise we provide false expectations to the taxpayer about what we can do. It's nice to be a hero, but being a hero one year and a villain the next isn't great.
So again, through you, Mayor Ostrander, to the committee, we are now recommending borrowing $235,150 from, not borrowing, using $235,150 from OSIF, and we are at 3.00%.
Okay. So an additional $65,000 of tax support over and above the 16. Okay, everyone okay with that? Okay, friends, that brings us to the end of our spreadsheets. Are we comfortable? Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley.
Thank you. So just looking at the total that we are borrowing and paying back from reserves, Linda, could you please tell me what that total is, or is that at the bottom of, is that at like 840,000? Or is, I'm looking at the budgeted funding sheet, the one that has planning, building and bylaw on it. So is that the total that we are borrowing and paying back to reserves, 840,000?
Through you, Mayor Ostrander, that's correct. You did not add any additional borrowing tonight.
Yeah, okay. And we would be paying that back over how many years?
It depends on the item. So it'll be based on the useful life of each item you're borrowing for.
So it's not just we're borrowing that and we're going to pay it all back, 80,000 a year for 10 years or however, just without interest. Of course, we're adding the interest to that. That was another question. May I ask another question?
You may.
It has to do with percentages. I believe last week we spoke about the bank rates being 5.545. And you mentioned earlier that probably if we were borrowing from ourselves, we would use the same rate. Could I have an explanation as to what the benefits are from borrowing internally, borrowing externally? Like, to me, would we be farther ahead just borrowing from the bank and kind of making sure that we keep money in our own bank here in case of, for a rainy day? If you could just explain the benefits, thank you.
There are several benefits to borrowing internally. For one, if you borrowed externally now, you would lock it in for 10 years, say a vehicle, for the full 10 years at 5.45%. And as the interest rates drop, you're going to still be paying 5.45% over that time. Or a larger item that might be 20 years. You don't want to be locked in for 20 years at 5.45. Especially when we're hearing from economists that the rates may start dropping by the middle of 2024 and then continue to decline for a little bit, depending on how the recession reacts. So that's the number one benefit, is that we're not locking ourselves in. Number two, it's very flexible for us. So if in any given year we have a lot of financial constraints and we are looking for ways to reduce our operating budget, we might look at reducing our repayments by a little bit. So if you're looking for 50,000, maybe you're going to reduce that payment. You have the flexibility to do that, but you wouldn't with an external borrowing. We get the bank rate on all our money. We started this program. I'm thinking around 2000, and I believe it might have even been a little bit in Bruce Davis's day. So it's been a long time that we've been doing this, but we made it a full-time vehicle replacement program for those reasons. And also, as our bank balances are not really dropping, although we're borrowing more and more. The interest that we're earning on our reserve funds, our development charges right now are, like I said, 5.45%. So interest where we used to get, $2,000 a year, we're getting 50,000. So our bank balances are growing. We might as well utilize what we have. There could be other ways to manage this. Maybe we could put our money out into higher interest investments. And that is another option, but then we're going to be borrowing externally for everything. We can't fund our capital projects, our road projects internally until we get to the end of the year if we don't have the bank balances. And so this program has been really beneficial for this municipality, and I think that that's helped us stay fiscally strong. And we didn't get affected by the recession as much as maybe others did for that reason.
And the internal borrowing regimen and rolling stock replacement regimen all were in place when I first was elected in 2003. I believe it was the first amalgamated council that started that. So it would have been 2000 to 2003 that all got put in place. I remember being pretty impressed actually with how the budgeting process went. And of course, I just get more and more impressed with your team, Director Whitfield. You're welcome.
On behalf of my team.
So let's flip over to water, wastewater, and then we can wrap up the spreadsheets entirely and have a more fulsome. I'm sorry, Councillor Fredis, you did have your hand up. I'll go to you first.
To the chair, thank you. I apologize. I missed an item when we were doing under road construction projects, the electric charging station at the Sobeys parking lot for 280,000. We talked about this at the last meeting, and we were asking about a business model, and Councillor Wilden was kind enough to send some literature. And I'm aware of the three basic models, which is give it away, cover cost, or make a return. But I think with the 40,000 we spent last year and this 280, $350,000 for two chargers, we need to have a model that actually makes a profit and generates an ROI. And it perhaps is a little unfair to be asking staff to do that sort of business model creation in the heat of the budget process. I wonder if we might not be better off to kind of pull this from the cycle, allow staff to do their study and revisit it at another time.
Staff, any comments? Well, as somebody's coming up to address this, I will note that it is deferred revenue or from a grant. I guess it's gas tax. It's gas tax money. And I know that money is coming from the taxpayer as well, so I'm acutely aware of that. But it is not hitting our property tax support at this stage. But so no danger, in other words, in leaving it there. And if we don't like the business model, saying no, figure it out. We'll need to budget more later. But Mr. Gooding, you're at the microphone, sir.
All right, through the chair is the original 208,000 that we bought it outright, no grants. And that's 1 unit, 2 ports. I think about 2 weeks ago on Friday, the Ministry of Transportation came out with a new grant application where we get 75% of that cost covered. However, to qualify, we have to have duplication of services. So I have to have 1 port, other port, and then, or sorry, 1 unit, another unit, 2 ports on each in order to qualify for that grant. But I get 75% of that money back, and I can stack it with other grant applications if they become available as well. So the capital cost, perhaps we look at it as a sunk cost that 75% is covered, and we're just funding the 25% difference. The operating cost, we reach out to the city of Ottawa and ask about their experience, and they said it's generally revenue neutral, because you can operate where we share revenues with an operator, so be like Lexicon or Ivy or whoever you choose to partner with. They don't make a huge profit. They make some, but it usually just covers the operating costs of painting stalls or replacing bollards if it got damaged or whatnot. But it's generally, you can aim to have it revenue neutral. So for this councils, the cost would be perhaps just the, because we pre-roughed in the infrastructure already when we did the Sobeys parking lot. There's 2 conduits that go from the boulevard. That $40,000 you referenced was for about $35,000 for Hydro One to do a step down transformer. So it's ready to go. So at this point, it's 25% of the cost. And we can adjust these numbers to reflect that. But that information just came out 2 weeks ago prior to budget. Or after, sorry, that's subsequent to the budget.
Councilor Fredis.
Mr. Gooding, thank you for the explanation, and Mayor, thank you. I mean, I think you make a good point. It's only kind of tacked in a reserve. It's not a tax hit yet. What I appreciate from the explanation that Mr. Gooding's provided, and I think Director Whiteman said the same thing, the 75% grant is based on having 4 heads. I'm not sure Sobeys parking lot is the place to have 4 heads. And I think these things should be profit makers and not break-even propositions. Unfortunately, in that location, we lose the opportunity to generate advertising revenue from them. So for the moment, I'm happy with the fact that there's no tax hit. It's just kind of sitting there. And staff is still working on it, and hopefully we'll get a more fulsome report of a business model downstream.
Thank you for that. So we'll keep it tucked into the budget so that we can start a process and figure it out. I'm actually, I think the Sobeys parking lot is a good spot for them. People coming into the community, I mean, people who own an electric vehicle in Brighton are going to charge at home. They're not going to go to Sobeys to charge. It's for folks who are coming into the community, need somewhere to stop. What better spot than our downtown, so they can get out and go buy some shoes and some flowers and maybe some books, and then head on down the road. I do not want these tucked away somewhere. I want them in our downtown so that they are both driving the charge of a vehicle and driving our local economy, even if it is just 1 or 2 people. I think Councillor Wheeldon, and then I'll come to Councillor Butler.
I was just going to say pretty much exactly that. Some people have done studies into where in Brighton would be the best place, and that was the best place.
Councillor Butwell.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Gooding. So if I understand correctly, $280,000 is for 1 unit? 1 unit with 2 pigtails.
Yeah, it's actually 2 stalls. Yeah, correct.
Okay.
1 unit, 2 stalls.
And in order to qualify for the 75% funding, we require 2 units or Four
salts.
pigtails. So 75% of double that cost is $420,000, leaving us with a balance of $140,000. And that we would have to pay for ourselves. Is that how I understand
Through the
it?
chair, that's correct.
Through the chair, okay. And when we talk about it being revenue neutral, how do we recoup that $140,000?
So through the chair is you partner with my understanding is you partner with a vendor and as explained is you can have where you have peak times and you're trying to generate revenues and the partner by operating would generate revenues by operating on our behalf and then we would get a share. It's hard to determine if, based on usage. I mean, really, if we don't get a large usage, maybe perhaps we're not making as much of a profit. It's tough to determine. But what we're trying to do is put level 3s in, so it's more of a draw to downtown. So the idea is you visit your family from out of town. You're ready to leave. Well, your parents or in-laws that you're visiting might not have a level 3 charger at their house, so you could be 3 days to charge your vehicle to get home. Versus now with the level 3s that we might be able to provide here is you can charge in an hour. So you come down, do your groceries, and charge a car and go home.
Okay. Do we have any sense of if we were to make a small profit, what that would look like? Like how long it would take us to recoup somewhere close to $140,000? And at that point, are we more than likely to see machines that are outdated?
Through the chair is unfortunately most municipalities in this area went for like quick wins and they went for level 2s, which are considerably cheaper, but they're not as desirable. So that's why we had to reach out to the city of Ottawa for their experiences and generally they said it's they're not making a huge profit. He says anything they make goes into reserves for future stations, but you're not going to make the 140 back right off the hop. It might be a long duration. We're hoping though is with partnering with like I said, a large vendor of Ivy or the Lexicon that they can provide us the support to keep us current with the technology.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Any other questions or comments before we move on to environmental services? Acting Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So this project would only happen if we were successful in getting grant money? Is that what you're saying? Are we going to go ahead regardless? We're just waiting for a report. So
Right.
it's just on the table for now.
Right. So we're gonna bookmark $280,000 and we're gonna get a business case. Staff is gonna bring back a business case. That business case may include a 75% grant and also some operating revenue so we can figure out what kind of money we're going to be able to recoup.
Happy to wait.
Yeah. But because it's not in the property tax support column, it's not costing the taxpayer anything by taking the money and doing nothing. It's our gas tax. If we don't use it, we put it back and we use it for another project. Yeah. Thank you. So environmental service, water and wastewater. There is still a support column. It is not tax support. It is user fee support or rate supported, I think we say. And we'll start with wastewater, the engineering design of the wastewater pollution control plant. Development charges are paying for $750,000 and the rate support is paying for $250,000. Questions or comments from members of council? Moving on to the wastewater plant itself. We have $850,000 coming from development charges and $1,377,000 coming from rate support. Questions or comments? Councillor Fredis.
To the chair, thank you. I'm not sure if this is the right place to ask the question, but impost fees, do they factor into this somewhere? And
Director Whitfield.
That could be the rate support portion. Impost fees will definitely be an operating budget revenue. And then anything that we fund through rate support would be funded from all the revenues that are generated by that department.
So because we don't have a column that says revenue from impost fees yet, the money, I think what the director's saying is the money that we draw from any impost fees we have would go to offset the rate supported portion of the budget from a capital perspective. So you wouldn't have to worry every time you turn on your tap because you know someone else is paying for it. Any other questions or comments on this particular portion of the spreadsheet? Go ahead.
So I gather when we get to the operations part of things, there will be some attempt to calculate what that number will be.
Director Whitfield?
Yes, we're still working with Watson and Associates to figure that out, but yes, we'll bring that through operating.
Thank you. Anyone else? So moving on to water. We have 1,444,000 coming out of reserves, 3,785,000 out of development charge. No, I'm going to the total. Sorry. 2,184,000 coming out of development charges, 2,153,000 coming out of grants or deferred revenue, and $645,000 coming out of rate support. Questions or comments from members of council? We're here endeth the lesson. Where do we want to go? Do we want to bring it back? Are we comfortable with the budget as we've said it tonight?
Where are we at, Linda? 3.00?
Yeah, 3.3%.
We are exactly where we started, 3%.
With a little tweaking here and there. So the total tax support is 1.7+ million dollars. And the total rate support is 2.268+ million dollars. Council, are you comfortable if we put a motion on the floor to pass the capital budget tonight? Getting one thumb up. Councilor Fredis? You're good? Oh, you were saying you're good. I thought you had a question, sorry. Yeah? Okay. Thank you, staff, for that. We look forward to the next operational meeting. I know we have to set the date.
And if we are comfortable with the capital budget and you want to move it forward, you could pass a resolution tonight.
What would the levy amount be?
1,704,236.
Are there any other questions or comments from members of council with regard to the staff report 2024 budget book first draft? Mr. Jefferson, you're the only person here that is not a member of council or staff. Do you have any questions for question period? You got a thumbs up. We're good to go. I have the resolution. I should read it now. Is that what you're saying? Of course I should. Before question period. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Butwell, that the committee of the whole is recommending to council to approve the 2024 capital budget at a levy of $1,704,236. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Now we move into question period, of which there are none, I'm told. We have no closed session meeting this evening, which brings us to 7:59 p.m. and I'll adjourn this committee of the whole. Before I adjourn the committee of the whole meeting, we need to set a date for our next committee of the whole budget meeting. So calendars out, everybody.
Mayor Ostrander,
Yes.
that meeting will not be attended by most of staff. That'll be your external budget meeting. And so we'll have invitations that we'll want to send out to you. So if it can be a few weeks in advance, that would be great.
So we had the 22nd but we can't meet on the 22nd because
The library
the
board
library
meets
board,
at
thank you.
7.
Right. Okay. Madam Clerk,
But the next budget meeting is set for the 15th.
that's a training session.
Oh, right, sorry.
That's MPAC, I think, right?
Right.
So Tuesday, the 21st. Check my other calendar. Hang on. Well, I gotta check my other calendar. My dog goes to the vet that morning, but otherwise we're good. You're a maybe for the 21st? Like serious maybe? Right.
Just one other thing scheduled for that night on the 21st is an open house for post-development.
No, okay, so no. Um, it's the 16th, that's Thursday. November 16th. Going back in time. I'm clear. Too soon?
That should be okay. I should be able to get invitations out for that.
6 p.m. November 16th, Committee of the Whole, budget, external budgets, external and grants and aid. Okay, everyone, with that, it is 8:03 p.m. and I will declare this Committee of the Whole meeting adjourned with my thanks to everyone.